Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool little preview for you guys from the brand Traska. A little bit about them. They are headquartered out of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, and they were founded by John Mack with the intention of making a watch that you could wear every day without worrying about. A true tool watch to fit really any occasion or activity. He really has a great story about his inspirations and road to creating the Traska brand. Check out my review for the latest generation Freediver for the full synopsis. Now, in terms of this particular watch, it is an everyday watch, and it's been featured on my channel quite a few times before, but this is the latest 5th generation iteration. Now, when it comes to this type of watch, this falls under the genre of just pretty much an everyday watch. So some key characteristics and styling when you're looking for something that you can wear every day. Of course, you're going to find that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes. This is the Summiteer 5th generation reference 2159 in the new colorway of Oxblood Red. It is a refined blend of timeless design and modernity. The Summiteer just brings the classic field watch into the 21st century, combining a vintage aesthetic with contemporary engineering. This formidable traveling companion is resistant to water, scratches, and shocks. This has redesigned end links with tighter tolerances, a fully decoupling crown, and a brand new colorway. In terms of, really what are the points that define this all-new Summiteer reference. This is just meant to kind of reinvigorate that beloved staple of their collection that you guys know, if you're fans of the channel, that I've, reviewed and owned multiple iterations in the past, and just every time they come out with a new variation, it's just always improved somehow, and it's not like they're fixing deficiencies. They're really just continuing to refine a really, really strong formula and package. You can get these for $650 direct, and they will be in stock and ready to ship November 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern, depending on when you're watching this video. So with all that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, with a name like Summiteer and a 369 dial style layout with a triangle at 12, I think, clearly there's definitely an homage that's being paid to the vintage Rolex Explorer 1. But I will say that this watch, I feel like, does enough with the formula to really add something, right? It's not just a lesser variation of something that is desirable. They bring new features and honestly, even some extra design and visual differentiation that I can absolutely appreciate. Now, when it comes to the first feature, guys, it's going to be this scratch-resistant hard coating. So it's adding 1,000 Vickers of hardness to it, essentially, because normally 316L is normally around 200 hardness Vickers. So this is up to 1,200 HV. Some other great features are going to be the sizing, which I think they hit a real sweet spot here. They actually do have 2 options, so you can get a 36 millimeter, which is going to be definitely a parallel to the current Rolex Explorer 1, but you can also get it in a 38.5, and I think this is the real sweet spot here. So 38.5 millimeters in diameter, only 10.7 millimeters thick, and that is including that crystal, which you can see does sit proudly of the case. So although it might add some physical height, it's not going to add any visual height, and what it does add is a whole lot of visual interest. Now, in terms of the lug to lug, 46 millimeters lug to lug. Again, beautifully done in terms of the scratch resistant coating on here. In the very early iterations of this, you could tell the watch had a bit of a tint to it, especially when you had it next to another steel watch. In this case now, it's so bright, I just feel like you can't really tell. Like you can tell in that it's scratch resistant, but visually you can't tell that there's a coating there, which I think is awesome, especially considering how beautifully done this brushing is. I mean, look at the radial brush on that bezel, or even just the brushing on these fully articulated links. And you can even see the 3D milling done there on that end link. And I just look at the tight tolerances. My goodness, normally the camera will kind of give away the looseness, and in real life, you're not going to really notice. But I will say, even under 4K, even this close to the lens here, you guys are seeing how nice everything sits, and I absolutely I can appreciate that. Now, the crystal here is a box double dome sapphire with an inner AR coating, and you can see quite handsome. Does give nice legibility even at very harsh angles here. The really only distortion you're going to get is going to be along those outermost edges, and you can see there, very, very nice. Now, when it comes to the bezel, of course it's a fixed bezel, but it does have multiple finishes. You can see the radial brushing on top with a high polished bevel on the flanks, which is very, very nice. You do have a screw down crown, which is going to give you a confidence inspiring 100 meters or 330 feet of water resistance. And it's a decoupled crown, so in terms of screwing and unscrewing, it's definitely a much nicer experience there. And yeah, inside, oh, actually, did I showcase how nicely signed it is? Check out the Traska logo, very beautifully done, multiple finishes there, and it all feels good in terms of the tactile engagement from your fingertips. Now, the movement, although you can't see it because this is quite a sterile case back here, it is screwed in, so another great thing in terms of water resistance. The movement inside is actually the Miyota 9039 movement, which is a no-date movement, which means there's no ghost positioning on the crown settings, which I know can be a pet peeve for a lot of folks. This does have a 42-hour power reserve and beats at 4 hertz, so you're going to see a nice beat rate and that nice smooth sweeping hand there of the seconds, and that is beating at 28,800 vibrations per hour. In terms of the dial here, guys, this is a stunner. Check that out. Matte Oxblood red, and it is contoured beautifully. Check out that almost sector-like center section where you can get a little bit of roundness there. Just adding a little bit of depth, which I like, especially considering they're adding, you know, the 3D applied indices. Check that out. So now you're getting a multi-level, multi-layer setup, and I think it just looks fantastic. And this particular Oxblood red also is very versatile. Typically, red can be a little out there, can be a little bit bold, but this Oxblood colorway, I would say, is really nice because it just blends in beautifully with like earthy tones. So if you're somebody who wears like browns, greens, stuff like that, this is going to just blend in really, really nicely. And I dig that. I like the consideration there in terms of the colorways that they're offering and something that really suits the platform. And it's not something that's just gimmicky, right? Like I like this in particular. And big shout out to Jon from Traska for sending this piece in, lending it in for me to kind of get a preemptive video before the release so that hopefully some of you guys can get an early jump and a head start on adding it to cart before they're sold out, because like many successful micro brands, Traska will do runs in phases. They come and they go, and sometimes you find out about a great new release and it's already too late. Now, the Luminova here that they're using is Swiss Super Luminova BGW9, so it has a nice blue hue to it, which you will see here when we get to some darker shots. But the lug width, 20 millimeters, very nice. I appreciate that they keep the 20 millimeter lug width. They are drilled lugs, so you can swap that out very easily. You do have everything solid, everything fully articulated, beautifully finished. Very nice short links to where you don't really even need half links, but you do get them. You get half links, right? And check it out. Very nice push button, fully milled, toolless micro adjusting clasp. So go ahead, and they even updated it from the last generation to where it actually has more points of adjustment. So it went from like, I think 5 positions to 6 positions. So I can absolutely, again, something people weren't asking for. Oh, I wish it had a little, no. Like, they just went and made it better without you asking. They tightened up tolerances. Nobody was complaining about. Nobody was like, oh, like, this could be better. This is a big, you know, no-go for me. Like, people already liked it. I was one of them. I really enjoyed the tolerances and the fit and the finish and everything. And they still went out of their way to improve. And again, that's something that is not necessarily from the entrepreneurial mindset. That is absolutely from the enthusiast mindset and wanting to provide, you know, the best products possible. So very, very cool. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears beautifully. Ooh, look at that. What a looker. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to notice some perspective distortion, and that is one of the reasons why smaller watches tend to look a lot better on Instagram. So one thing I like to do, of course, is just leave my wrist nice and low here, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. Now you can see really beautifully centered, and although my 7.5-inch wrist is on the larger side of average, I will say that it is quite round. It's a tall wrist, so it's not like it's flat and wide and super accommodating to every watch that comes across it. I do have to be considerate in terms of like what looks great and to scale. And I will say this 38.5 really hits a sweet spot. Check that out. Beautifully thin, guys. Love the contouring on the sides. This wasn't always like that. Again, things that nobody complained about, they still went out of their way to improve over various iterations. And man, every time something comes across my desk from Traska, it's just improved. Like the leather in the pouch that it comes in is even more supple and soft. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, if there's a brand that really impresses me, I love reconnecting with them, because in reality, right, as a watch collector, you're not going to be out there buying every new, it's not like a phone where you get a new one every couple of years, right? Like you probably want a little bit of diversity. So I think it's nice that they try to go out of their way to add value. So if you do want to upgrade to the newest model, that you are actually upgrading. Like they've done work to that. And the older models, there's some people that like some of the changes in terms of some of the stylistic and visual changes that don't even have to do with build quality. So that can definitely still be an incentive for people to get stuff on the used market. So yeah, I think it's a nice little balance and circle of life here, but whew, look at that. It just lays beautifully. I think it looks great. This colorway, again, it's not something that I would choose. Personally, like, hey, I was going to come out with a watch brand. Let me make an Oxblood red dial. But I have to say, after seeing it in the metal, this thing is beautiful. It hits certain shades where sometimes it's dialing in more to a brown tone. Sometimes it's dialing into an even kind of deep purple. So, yeah, I like that. It just is very versatile. And I think it looks really, really handsome. Ultimately, a lot of times, from far away, you're looking at something, it's going to render as visually black in a lot of different lighting conditions. So then when you look at something with a little bit more light on it, and like even if you look at it like this is rendering pretty dark, at least on the little screen, the little flip out screen on my camera. But if you get a little bit more light on it, look at that. And then you do get a lot of life from the contouring on the dial in that center circular dropped down section. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, yes, the 3D lume blocks, they're not just cool looking in daylight. They absolutely do perform in low light as well. Check that out. Really beautiful orientation. Of course, you do have that triangle indice standing out at 12 o'clock, but you also do have the orientation of 3, 6, and 9, and you even get little lume plops on the outer reaches there for even more, viewing pleasure. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. And as you can see, guys, it's really nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see, my goodness, let's start with the dial, right? Look at the contrast. Basically a black dial. And then you get into and then even if you like really get a lot of light on it, it just animates in a really interesting way. And I like that. It's still not loud, right? For those of you that, are trying to stay, that like something a little bit more understated, I like that it still keeps a very understated color palette. It looks very serious and purpose-built, because it absolutely is. But you're still getting a good amount of style, but nothing that's flashy, right? And I think that's going to resonate with a lot of folks. Now, if we look at the finishing on that bezel. the radial brush. Look at the uniform glide of light over the brushing on the links. This is just a really well executed piece, and the nice thing is with that hard coating, guys, in previous videos, I've like scratch tested these, like this same coating, well, a previous variation of it anyway, and it held up super well. So, like I took, you know, the easiest thing is to take, well, like what's it called, spring bar tool, right? There's all the knurling, the sharp edges, and, you know, just try to scratch it, and it was very smooth. It was almost like things didn't want to catch onto it. Because of that outer layer. So totally works. I you know, I appreciate that. And again, the price isn't super elevated considering that you're getting that coating. $650, I think is more than reasonable, especially for a brand now that's really proven itself. This isn't some Kickstarter brand that just launched, right? This is a brand that people have grown to really enjoy and are quite enthusiastic about collecting at this point. So, guys, with all that said, let's get into some closing thoughts on the wrist. Really, for me anyway, and my wrist, perfect proportions. Very comfortable and balanced wear. The hard coating is even less noticeable visually than in previous generations. So if it's been a while since you picked up a Traska and maybe the darkness wasn't something you were crazy about, hey, give it another shot in one of these newer iterations and generations, because they've definitely improved the formula when it comes to that hard coating. Now, in terms of model variants, you can get, of course, the classic charcoal black. There's the midnight blue, which is, you know, a colorway that I've had in my personal collection for a few different iterations. Sage green, which green is huge right now. And then, of course, Oxblood red, as seen here. I think the Oxblood is definitely a bit of a dark horse, where I don't know how many people are asking for this color dial, but I think there's going to be quite a few folks that are going to add it to cart, because it's cool. It's serious. And then the nice thing is, you know, as much as I love a black dial or blue dial watch, you kind of have a lot of cross competition at that point, right? Like, which blue dial watch am I going to grab out of like the 5 or 3 or 4, 5, 6, whatever, you know, that you own? Or the same goes for a black monochromatic dial. They're all kind of competing with each other. And the nice thing is something like this really just gives you a different dimension to kind of draw from. So I like that a lot. I would be torn. I don't know. And hopefully I'm able to pick up one of these. I think maybe staying within the blue dial, because I have, you know, various generations from the first gen to, you know, a couple else along the way. I would probably stick with the blue. But as just somebody buying from scratch, I don't know, this red is just really cool. So in terms of comparable models, guys, this is kind of like Tudor Ranger / Black Bay 36 meets Monta Triumph. And really a nice direct competitor in terms of price point, because those are much more expensive watches. Even the Monta's a lot more expensive, and it's a beautiful watch. I own it. I've like basically promoted it, you know, over the years, because I enjoy it that much, and I'm kind of, you know, not shy about saying it's one of the better watches you can buy from an independent brand. You know, but it's still more expensive, you know, in general. And then, of course, you can go even higher up, and Tudors are way more expensive. But a nice direct comparable in terms of like today's pricing and within this market would be something like the Baltic Hermétique Tourer. And I love that watch. It has a similar kind of 3D Explorer type of dial. I feel like they go a little bit heavier on the dial design and then lighter on the case and bracelet, where here you're getting a much more solid case and bracelet and maybe a little bit more of a subtle dial with, you know, less tricks to it. So like this definitely reads more as an adventure watch, where that one reads as like, whoa, this is a really cool looking watch, tons of visual interest. But then I feel like you kind of have to figure out what it is. And it's not quite as intuitive as this, where you look at it and you're like, oh, this is a modern field watch, adventure, explorer type watch. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below on that. So for me, guys, if I was to sum it up, bottom line, Jon and Traska have refined the Summiteer, again, from a no-nonsense everyday field watch into a very luxury-like adventure piece that can impress equally, whether out on the summit or back at your local headquarters. So I love that idea. I dig the versatility, but it's not boring. They're still doing fun things. They're adding little details here and there. And again, improving things that nobody was complaining about. Nobody was like, oh man, if only Traska improved their build quality. But for some reason, he is going out of his way to continue to improve upon it. So I just have to shine a light on that. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you're not already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.